What's up everybody, it's Izzy, and in this video I'm going to go into part 2 of how to cheat drug tests. And again, the reason why I'm talking about this topic is to give you guys a better BS filter. When someone says it's easy to cheat drug tests, you can kind of say, okay, how is it so easy? Explain it to me. And you can see whether or not they're basically full of shit right off of the bat. So in the first video, what I really focused on was the out-of-competition testing pool, which is run by WADA. WADA is the World Anti-Doping Agency, and they are a third party that is separate from the IPF. So the IPF contracts them to test its athletes so that there's no bias. The WADA has no financial incentive to protect certain lifters because WADA is a separate organization than the IPF. And WADA is contracted by many other professional sports organizations, including the Olympics, including the UFC, including boxing, and a variety of others. However, what I did want to focus on is that not every single athlete is in that out-of-competition testing pool. Only the very best athletes in a given nation are in that pool. Generally, you're only registered in that pool if you're somebody who has earned a slot on a world team at some point. And to earn a slot on a world team, what you have to do is win nationals. And the only exception to that is if the person ahead of you who won nationals doesn't want to go and you're selected as an alternate, which is usually done based on Wilks score. But the overarching point that I want to make here is that the only people who are really registered in that pool are maybe the top 1 to 2, at the very most top 3 people in their age, weight, gender class, right? So it's somebody who is usually either the very best in the nation or one of the top 2 people in a specific weight class and age class and gender. Anyway, that leaves a whole group of people who can, sort of game the test because they always know when they're going to be tested. They're not tested outside of the competition. They're only tested after the competition. And if you're always tested after the competition, you know that you're going to be tested on competition day. So what you can do is you can kind of make sure that you come off of everything in time for that test. However, there's a lot of misinformation out there about this. First of all, if you are going to compete in the USAPL more than once per year, this really limits you on the amount of compounds that you can use. For example, one compound that everyone likes to accuse everyone of is tren, and we'll focus on tren acetate since it's the the nectar of the gods, whatever. It's the best steroid ever, according to some. Tren acetate produces metabolites which can be detected for 3 to 4 months. So even though tren acetate itself has a half-life of tops 72 to 96 hours, it's probably shorter than that, and it's completely out of your system because of that in a matter of weeks. The metabolites are not, and the metabolites can be tested for months. So for somebody who is going to be tested out of competition, they cannot use standard versions of these drugs. They cannot use standard versions of tren, deca, D-bol, all of your typical steroids. And the reason for that is because the metabolites last for so long that you can't have a 3 to 4 month period where you don't get tested if you're in this out of competition testing pool. For example, elite caliber lifters like Ray Williams have been tested 3 to 5 times so far this year out of competition, and that's with the full WADA panel. Now, powerlifting doesn't test quite as often as, like, say, the Olympics, but it's still a substantial amount, as you can see. So if you're going to be tested, every, let's say, 2 months. If you're going to be tested every 2 months, you can't use a substance ever which has a detection time of 3 to 4 months because you're guaranteeing that you will get caught. Now, if you're one of those people who's not in the out-of-competition testing pool, still, that means you can't really compete more than twice per year. You can at most compete twice per year if you're going to run, tren ace, because it's going to be detectable if you run it twice per year for 6 to 8 months out of the year. So, again, that just really limits your options. So for tested athletes, even the ones that know when the tests are, the options are extremely limited because of the extremely long detection times of most of the commonly used compounds out there. So untested athletes can basically use whatever they want, whenever they want, in whatever amounts they want, but the same is not true even for the person who uses drugs but in a drug-tested federation. So cheaters can't use as much as people who are untested. Now, this is important to note because it really limits the options, like I said. And some of the main things that it limits you to are compounds with extremely short detection times. These are usually aqueous compounds, so hormones and drugs that are suspended in water, like HCG, testosterone suspension, or like staying with tren suspension, tren no ester. these are basically the options that are available. Extremely short-acting, short-lived hormones. Now, again, though, if there's ways to catch people who use these things as well, and that's what I want to focus on in this video. So, if you're registered for the out of competition testing, there are ways that they can catch you for using testosterone. And a lot of people don't know about this. So just because testosterone is a bioidentical hormone, meaning that, it's naturally occurring in the body, there's no structural changes made to your basic vial, of test and enthate. It's just how the enanthate part is just how it's, suspended, and how it's going, it's just the ester weight that how it's going to be processed and metabolized by the body. But the actual testosterone itself is the same. Now, this is important because it makes it difficult to test for, since it's naturally occurring in the body. You can't just directly test for testosterone or things that are, metabolites of testosterone or byproducts of testosterone metabolism, because that's always going to be in the body. Any male or female has a level of testosterone, and so you can't test for those things. Now, there are certain things that they can test for, though. So the most known one, but many of you won't know what it is, but it's still the most known, is the T to E test. The T to E ratio test. And this is something called the testosterone to epitestosterone ratio test. So epitestosterone is basically a byproduct of testosterone production that is produced in almost equal amounts to testosterone. And in somebody who's making their own testosterone, this ratio will be about 1:1, and it can be detected in the urine. Now, there is some variation genetically, and amongst various races and ethnicities, there's variation as well. However, what they found is that statistically, a ratio of 4:1, so testosterone to epitestosterone, will capture 95% of genetic variation. A ratio of 6:1 captures 99.9% of genetic variation. So a testosterone to epitestosterone ratio of greater than 6:1 gives you a 99.9% chance that somebody is a cheater. However, they need confirmation. But before I get into that, let me explain a little bit more. So when someone takes an exogenous form of testosterone, so when they're injecting testosterone or using some other thing like, patches, cream, whatever, their body will stop producing its own testosterone because it recognizes that there's an outside source. So part of the regulation that happens is that you no longer make your own testosterone. Now, for untested lifters, this is not a concern because they're still getting a huge amount from the amount that they're injecting or that they're intaking some other way. However, because you're not producing your own testosterone anymore, you will stop producing as much epitestosterone as well. You produce epitestosterone and testosterone in almost equal amounts. So if your body is producing almost no testosterone, it will also produce almost no epitestosterone. And so this is where, when you get these crazy ratios, like someone who has a 80:1 testosterone to epitestosterone ratio, you know that they're using an outside form of testosterone because the ratio is so out of whack. Now, again, confirmation testing is possible through something called a CIR test, and this is the carbon isotope ratio test. So the way that the carbon isotope ratio test works is that they'll actually look at, the structure of the testosterone in an individual's body, and natural testosterone. They'll look at the carbon 12 and carbon 13 isotopes. And essentially, there's a different ratio between these two things in synthetic testosterone and natural testosterone. And this ratio is consistent throughout the body. So they can take a look at something like your cholesterol, see what the carbon 12 to carbon 13 isotope ratio is, and then if they look at your testosterone, it should be a very similar ratio, and if it's not, then that right there can trigger a positive test. And so this is the way that they can catch you for things like testosterone suspension. Even though it has an extremely short half-life and it's water-based, it's still a synthetic form of testosterone, and it will produce an altered 12 to 13 carbon isotope ratio, which will trigger a positive test. So this is the way that they can catch people who are doing this with out of competition WADA panels. It will still show up. Now, they don't usually do the carbon isotope ratio test unless the T to E ratio is out of whack. So one of the ways that people try to cheat is through something called microdosing, where they'll use testosterone to top their levels off to a certain amount without causing complete suppression so that they have a T to E ratio within the bounds, right? And another thing that people will do is they'll actually inject epitestosterone itself. However, now WADA has developed a test for epitestosterone, and if it's in certain concentrations, they'll basically say that you failed the test due to using a masking agent. So some of the strategies that people use is they combine testosterone with HCG so that the HCG creates basically signaling in the testicles, or for women in other ways where you are still producing some of your own testosterone. So again, even though you're taking an outside amount, you're still producing. HCG is forcing you to produce your own as well, so that you still fall within the bounds of the T to E ratio test. And the T to E ratio test, will be on even a basic, like $75 urine test. You don't even need a full WADA panel for that. So, people, like I said, the problem with even doing stuff like that, though, with the microdosing and using HCG, is that HCG is detectable for like a week. So, depending on the dose, of course. So, as you can see, when it comes to the chemistry side of this, people are so wrong when they say, oh, it's so easy to pass drug tests. It's super easy to pass drug tests if you know when the drug test is going to be. That is the only time that it's easy to pass a drug test. If you are getting tested outside of the meet and you don't know when the test is going to happen, even if you're using bioidentical hormones like HGH or testosterone, there are methods of catching people. Blood tests will catch HGH. I don't want to get into the mechanisms in the way that I did with testosterone, but the bottom line is that it's very doable. You can catch people using HGH. You can catch people using testosterone. Just because testosterone is bioidentical does not mean that you can get away with using it due to the T to E ratio test and carbon isotope ratio testing. So even though neither of those methods is perfect, there are ways to catch people. So this kind of leaves us really with one other option as far as beating things on the level of chemistry, and that's using undetectable performance enhancers. So this usually comes down to things that like people, don't even know exist yet. For some reason, people think that SARMs are undetectable. This is actually 100% false. There's people on the banned list right now, on the USAPL suspension list, IPF suspension list, who were caught for SARMs. A high-profile lifter recently was caught for LGD. So, yeah, SARMs are detectable. Sorry to burst your bubble on that one. SARMs are definitely detectable. Now, the other option here is something like, say, the Cream, which was a steroid developed by Balco Laboratories and given to major sports stars such as Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire. Now, is it possible that there are some elite powerlifters who have undetectable designer steroids? I'm not going to say it's impossible. However, we need to keep in mind that Barry Bonds is a multi-millionaire and that the people working for Balco Laboratories are working with multi-millionaires who have the resources and the reward system in place. Like if you're a great baseball player, you get millions of dollars of contract value, right? If you're a great powerlifter, like SBD might send you some knee sleeves and some supplements every once in a while. Like you might be able to start a coaching business and make $100,000 a year if you're really good at it. Like it's completely different levels of reward. So is it possible that there's just somebody who's independently wealthy who had someone developed an undetectable like performance enhancer like the Cream for them? Yeah, it's possible, but is that likely? Well, I'm going to leave that up to you. So anyway, the main point of these first two videos was that I wanted to lay like the foundation of the third video, which is going to be where the real problems with drug testing are, and they come down to funding, politics, and procedural issues. The main thing that I wanted to focus on with the first two videos is to show you that on the chemistry level, it is not that easy to pass drug tests. It's extremely difficult to pass WADA panels. Extremely difficult. It takes an extremely knowledgeable chemist with large amounts of resources in order to do this. It's not just some guy like you can't just watch some guy's video on YouTube and Google for 30 minutes and beat a WADA panel test. And for people who are registered in the out of competition testing pool, you will be tested every month, every 2 months, every 3 months at like the longest. So, and you don't know when those tests are going to happen. So again, the main point here, it's really not easy on the chemistry level to pass the test. One of your only options is just to get lucky. So you take things maybe like once a week, so that when they test you, it's not detectable anymore. Microdosing can potentially work, but there's ways to catch that as well. Like I said, you have to be really ahead of the curve as far as chemistry. The only guaranteed way would be to take a new substance that is not yet prohibited by WADA, that is not yet banned, that is not yet known about. This is a possibility, but extremely difficult to do. And the kind of people that have the chemistry knowledge to do this are helping people where the stakes are worth millions and billions. They're not helping powerlifters where the highest stakes is maybe, like a $5,000 check at what, like the Arnold. There's prize money isn't there for this. So in part 3, I'll get into the real criticisms of drug testing and powerlifting, which come down to, again, like I said, procedural issues, non-compliance issues with certain countries, politics, bribery, things like that. But hopefully, after watching this video, you guys will realize that as far as the chemistry goes, it's not that simple. And just because a certain somebody on YouTube told you that drug tests are a joke and they're super easy to pass, doesn't make it true. All right? Anyways, that's all I have to say about that one. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, my friends, have a good day and good luck with your training. Peace.